I wanted to give us something to kind of hold on to. I am going to be celebrating my 25th anniversary of graduating law school. And I was thinking, oh, to be back in those seats where you all are, those were really fun days. And it was really exciting to be able to learn about law and focus on health law in particular. And I was at Dalhousie University, and there was a new professor named Colleen Flood back then. And it was great to get to know Colleen in her early days as a professor. So today I wanted to share with you my thoughts. These are just my own. There's no one path to getting to your career that you want to have in health law, but I do want to share my path because I think it is, it's always helpful to see when people are, in the roles that you think you would like to have, how did they get there? What was that journey like? And I do want to also share some upfront messages. You cannot mess this up. There is no way that you have to get to your dream job. I meet with so many lawyers over these 25 years. I've been meeting with all kinds of lawyers in all kinds of ways, and people have real nervousness at times that they're not going to get to the place they want to get. And one of my messages to you is you can always get there. There's a long path and a short path to your dream job. So if you ever at any point get off track, you can get back on the right track and you can find that job that you want to have and the work that you want to do and the impact you want to have. Another key message for today is that I think that lawyers are trust builders. I want to talk a little bit about trust. It's one of my great passions in the work that I do. I want to unpack that a little bit. I also want to acknowledge that I've had a lot of privilege in my life, and that some of the ways in which I've got to some of the work that I've had to, been able to do is not going to be available to everyone because not everybody has the same privileges as I have had. So from time to time, I'm going to pop up and acknowledge that, but I do think it is relevant that I am standing on the shoulders of a whole lot of privilege for myself. So I think it's relevant. So the first thing I want to talk about is really just my journey. Like, what are the markers of the path that I've had to this role that I have now? So now I am in private practice. I have my own law firm. We have 3 lawyers in my law firm, and we do exclusively health law. I also have a training company where we train healthcare providers, clinicians, administrators on legal issues. So I have 2 businesses right now, but I wanted to kind of give you a sense of how I got there. So when I was in law school, I did my Master's of Health Administration. So I actually graduated a year after the colleagues that I started law school with. So I had no idea how you applied to get into a law firm. Everybody started that process a year before me. And what I did was I just focused on, I only want to do health law. So all the only places I applied to were law firms in Halifax and in Ontario that did health law. And I started my journey as a lawyer at Weir Folds, which was a law firm. We think we had about 75 lawyers at the time, would have been considered big law. And the reason I wanted to start at a big law firm was I wanted to get as broad an experience of health law as I could get. And at the time, Weir Folds was really known for litigation and administrative law. And so I was able to work for about 12 different lawyers at that law firm doing both litigation and corporate commercial work. Originally, when I was in law school, I thought I was going to be a litigator. I grew up in a tiny little town with a dad who was a police officer and a mom who was a nurse. And I was a people pleaser, health law. That's how that happened. And I really thought I was going to be a Crown attorney. That's why I originally went to law school. My initial passion about law was really on a criminal side. And then I got to know this thing called health law, and that drew me into kind of this broader understanding of what I could be as a lawyer. And when I was at Weir Folds, again, I went in thinking I was going to be a litigator. I thought that's the path I was going to take. And the benefit for me in joining a bigger firm was I had rotations, and I got to experience what corporate commercial law was really about. I got to experience what an administrative law practice looked like and to do litigation. As it turns out, I am more disposed, just my personality and my interests, to more of a solicitor practice, which is what I ended up doing. But I did litigation for quite a while originally. So I was at Weir Folds for 4.5 years, and then my dream job came calling. And I heard that the lawyer at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health was moving into an administrative role, and they needed to hire someone for their general legal practice. And I jumped. So I loved my work at Weir Folds, but I jumped to get into this in-house job at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And I loved it. I loved every moment of it. Being in-house is totally different from being in a big law firm. There are no people who do things for you. You do all the things yourself. And there's no space between you and your client. Your client is all around you at all times, asking you things, witnessing you, asking you questions. And the big thing I learned about being in-house was the difference between a legal opinion and helpful legal advice. And I think most people who have the experience of being an in-house lawyer really get a grounding in how do you give information and guidance to a client that they can use. So much of what I had been doing when I was first initially a lawyer was giving accurate advice, but not necessarily helping my client to achieve what they wanted to achieve. So that was a really interesting observation and change for me when I went in-house. I was in-house for another 4.5 years, loved it. And then I got an itch. And I didn't think I was particularly entrepreneurial. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. No one that I was surrounded by had their own business, but something inside me made me think I wanted to go back into private practice. And I did. And I was by myself for a year. And I had a dog. We would go for walks and it was awesome. And I loved having that expansiveness. Also, I wanted to make sure that I was keeping on a learning trajectory, because when you're in-house, you have one client, and that one client's interest is really what you're focused in. And I wanted to expand my service to a broader range of clients. And so I started my own practice. I then joined with some other folks that I'd met through the Ontario Bar Association, and we created a health law boutique. And that was known as Dykeman Dewhirst O'Brien, DDO Health Law. I was there for 7.5 years, and we created our own little boutique group. And at one point we had 10 lawyers that were working all together, only focused on the healthcare system, which was really exciting, lots of expansive ideas. And from there, I wanted to grow again and go back into teaching, designing, coaching. And that's when I started this business. So 7 years ago now, I started my own law firm and my own teaching training company, because I had learned over the years that I loved teaching and I really wanted to get back into teaching. So, and that's when I really shifted my thoughts into thinking about law as a business and more entrepreneurial approach than just than being a lawyer only. So there was a shift there in my ideas. I get asked a lot about the practice of health law. And when I meet people in the community, people are like, what? You're a health lawyer? What does that mean? And for many of you, you will have a view as to what kind of health law you want to get involved in. But for those of you who are unsure, I usually think about health law as having 6 different real component parts. And you will find most lawyers who practice health law will fall in one of these categories. So litigation would be one of those categories. Many people think about medical malpractice as the practice of health law. That's where you find insurance law, you do the plaintiff or defense side of malpractice, labor law, you get estate litigation law that has a health law component to it, the litigation side. Then there's a corporate side. And those of you who take Colleen's course, you will know that healthcare is one of the most regulated industries we have in Canada. And if there's, and much of the delivery of healthcare is done by business, and those businesses have corporate expectations and needs. And then there's commercial activities like contract drafting, etc. So we're dealing with for-profit and not-for-profit corporations, contracts, tax issues, charities issues, also the facility of a healthcare organization. So there's, dealing with the construction or the environmental components of the buildings of health law. I would then look at administrative law. I have a lot of friends who work in the administrative law side of things, and that's the regulatory piece of the Regulated Health Professions Act. So acting for individual clinicians or dealing with organizations to help them understand the role that each of those clinicians play in their organization, and going before the tribunals of the regulated colleges. I have friends who work for the regulated colleges. We also see healthcare being delivered by municipalities and the tribunals. So one of the areas of practice that I focus on is privacy. And I would say that privacy really often is found in that administrative field of where you can go before the Information and Privacy Commissioner. I do physician privileges cases. So those cases, eventually start in a hospital and then they make their way through to the Health Professions Appeal and Review Board and to the courts. There are billing issues that also happen in that administrative space and issues of concern about how healthcare is funded. Another category many of you may be interested in is working in policy and government. So someone has to write the laws. Someone has to write the standards. Someone writes the policies. So these often happen through government. It can then also happen through tribunals, the Human Rights Tribunal or the Privacy Tribunal or the regulatory colleges, are writing standards. So someone's writing the laws, policy, standards, and then the rest of us interpret those laws. Some of us challenge those laws or those rules in different ways. I personally find that my practice is best captured by a concept of I do risk management and compliance work. That's really where I find I focus my time. I do a little bit of all of the rest of them, but I find that what I do is about strategic thinking, like, being in healthcare is hard. There's a lot of challenges, and we have to give wisdom advice to those people who deliver those services. How do they navigate relationships? How do they deal with a dead body that they find on their premises? How do they deal with tissue samples that thawed in a big ice container on their premises? Like, there are all kinds of these weird things that you are never going to find in a book, never going to find in the research that you have done. But over time, you kind of build up this expertise of dealing with that's weird. We're going to have to figure out a #goodenough way of addressing that risk. And also understanding, and I know Nyranne's going to talk about this, the complexity of the legal context in which healthcare organizations work. Of course, also we have teaching and research. So we have lots of lawyers who are doing academic work, lots of lawyers who are doing research and thinking of ways in which we can influence, again, the writers of the law and the development of standards in all kinds of in ways of intersecting with health and law. So those are the ways in which I think of health law. I really found it difficult when I was first starting out as a lawyer. There was a senior lawyer who worked in health law who once said to me, there's no such thing as health law. It's just, you're back to this slide. It's just that you're a corporate lawyer and you focus on healthcare. And I took that to heart and I thought, wow, maybe there is no such thing. And then over the years, I have come to realize there really is an expertise and a space to occupy as a health lawyer. It is an identity that I have taken on personally, because the people that I want to serve, the people I want to surround myself with are serving the health system, are in that struggle of health delivery, and are working with individuals receiving services when it's life and death, when it really matters, when we're dealing with pain and suffering. So I personally think there is this thing called health law. Just a question about your journey. Oh, great. And so there are some questions here coming out in the chat. So Jerry's talking about the Veterans Review Appeal Board is an excellent example of an administrative law tribunal that deals with applications denied by veterans for health benefits and services. So to Jerry's point, it's like that really dovetails in with what I'm talking about here. You're never stuck. There is always a path out from where you are to where you want to go. If you are not in your dream job doing 100% of the health law you wanted to do, there are ways in which you can jump to that next position. So what Jerry's talking about is finding service and activities that are adjacent to or actually in the health system that may not be traditionally known. So we're not going to think right off the top of the bat, the Veterans Review Appeal Board is not health law per se, but when you get into the details of that, you actually are practicing health law if you're dealing with the denial of resources to people for their health needs. You may want to do an international health practice, and that's going to be hard to get to, but you might go to it through the public admin route. I have a friend who is, again, these friends get into higher places as we go through life. So I have a friend who is in the Foreign Service and, is now sitting at international tables talking about the impact of health law. She isn't a health law expert, but she's dealing with health law issues as they come out. So I just invite you to think about, I hear this constantly, oh, I've been a litigator, now I want to go in-house. I guess I can never do that. Yes, you can, but you have to be able to articulate the jump from where you are to the place you want to be. You have to build the bridge. You have to be able to explain all the work and experience that you've had and explain how that is going to be relevant to the next position that you want. I also want to, say that originally when I was practicing, I had a really narrow view of what health law was, that I only really thought about it in the context of a hospital. And when I was first at Weir Folds, we acted mostly for hospitals, also for regulatory colleges. And then when I went in-house, I had the perspective of being, health law is hospital law. Since having my own practice in my own business, we now act for really the whole healthcare system. And we work for primary care teams, mental health agencies, children's services, school boards. Some of you might not be thinking, but school boards provide healthcare services. We act for universities, hospice, seniors care, long-term care, retirement homes, home care, brain injury organizations. So I just want to say that, again, to avoid being stuck, you may get into a firm, into providing services to folks that are not hospitals, but to the other kind of periphery service providers that have a health bent. So look for those. To kind of end off what I'm talking about, I still have 5 minutes. I wanted to just give you some concrete things that I did when I was a student and when I first graduated from law school and was a first lawyer, just to give you some tangible steps that I took. And again, this is where some of my privilege is going to be exposed. But number one, I did do a master's of health services administration when I did my law degree. So I did the 4-year program at Dalhousie, and that gave me language to talk about leadership in healthcare. I found that really valuable for me. I also did a specialization in health law. So I really doubled down on my commitment that when I graduated, I was going to be a health lawyer. Number two, I worked part-time for the Health Law Institute. And I know that some of you will be working with Colleen and the other faculty. That was hugely helpful for me to get that back seat view of like, how does a healthcare system work? How does law impact policy and decision-making? I also worked as an intern while I was at law school at healthcare organizations. I worked at the Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto for a summer. And then I also worked at the Ontario Hospital Association. And I was there in 1998 when we were first talking about telehealth. And I wrote the first paper on telehealth law because there wasn't any back then. And they have pulled out that paper since in the 2020 shift to deliver so much healthcare by telehealth service. That originated from my little paper back in 1998. So that was hugely helpful. I did win an award. When I was at school, I won the Robert Wood Johnson Award, which was given to a health services graduate who was most likely to contribute a valuable service to the health system. And getting that award really made me think about how I wanted to be of service to the healthcare sector. I would highly recommend that you write. I wrote a lot. I wrote for anybody who would take an article. I figured stuff out. Write as much as you can. I gave free trainings. When I was first a new lawyer, I would offer trainings to anybody for free if they wanted to receive a training about a legal issue. I went and joined the Ontario Bar Association, and I went to conferences, not legal conferences. I went to healthcare conferences and listened to what they hear as leaders, as service recipients. I also traveled to visit my clients in person and wanted to see, like, what does healthcare look like in Manitouwadge? It doesn't look the same as healthcare in Toronto, I can tell you that. And I would wait at the Tim Hortons and see, what was going on in these smaller communities. And that has really helped me deliver better service and wisdom as a senior lawyer. And then the final thing is I started a group. When I was first a lawyer, I created a group, a health law policy group of friends of mine who wanted to read about policy and law. And all of those members of that group over the last 25 years have become muckety mucks in the healthcare system. And we can't think about becoming a muckety muck when we're first graduated, but eventually you do. And it really helps to create community around yourself and people you can go to when you've got questions. So my final thought is thinking about yourself as building trust. I decided a few years ago that I wanted to focus my work on helping the people whose job it is to build a trustworthy healthcare system. And I just invite you to think about, who do you want to be a hero to? How do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your talent? How do you want to focus the work that you're doing? For me, and one of the things I've done is I've hired a designer to give me images that help me communicate to the public what I want to achieve. And I think that when I'm working with leaders in healthcare, I know that what they're trying to do is build a trustworthy healthcare system, and I'm here to help them reach their goals. So I think that's the end of my piece, but just to remind you, you're not alone. You have come together as an association of students. You have friends and faculty. By the way, I still go back and talk to Jocelyn Downey when I have a question about something at Dalhousie. I still, talk to Colleen when something's happening, and we call on each other. So, when you're new, you can't think that you have anything tangible to offer, but over time, you will. Creating community around you, you're not alone. There's no one way to get to where you want to go, and design something for you. figure out who you want to be a hero to.
Thank you, Kate. It was amazing for you to share your journey, and it's very thought-provoking. I'm gonna unmute Nyranne here. Oh, as you stop sharing, I lost her.
Great.
Perfect. We'll have Nyranne share her thoughts on case recognition, but also about her own career in health law.
Okay, thanks very much, Pascal. And I think some slides are coming up. It's a real pleasure to be here. Always daunting to follow Kate, who has the most incredible energy and creativity. But if I reflect on my path, in some ways I have been following Kate. So we'll see where the journey goes from here. But it's wonderful to be with students. And thank you to Colleen and the team at the center for pulling us together. I feel really privileged to be living up the street from what I believe to be the best center for health law in the country. And this hub of incredible scholars and leaders and future leaders is really energizing. And some of you are on my pipeline towards working on my team or are already working on my team. So it's really great to come together. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I won't go into as much detail. I've got a few minutes just to hit a couple of high points. But my journey on health law started before law because I used to work actually in a hospital in British Columbia at the BC Centre of Excellence for Women's Health when I was about 20. So that's a lot of years ago. But I always was sort of on a path towards this. And when I look back at my application for law school, which is a very long time ago, I applied saying that I wanted to be a health and constitutional lawyer. And that's basically what I do, right? It's public law and health. And what that looks like has completely evolved over time. I spent a decade as a litigator, and then I pivoted to a more traditional corporate practice. I would say my practice sounds a lot like what Kate's practice is, which is risk management, firefighting, and pulling in the right expert at the right moment and giving a lot of sort of gut check. So how does that sound? I think that's going to be okay. How does that sound? Not okay. So putting things on the right path for resolution based on my experience. So that's the practice I have right now, and who knows what the future holds. But if I think back to a key moment when I was sort of hunting for my dream job and reaching out to folks like Kate, I had a fantastic practice in private practice. I had a great office looking over, to the CN Tower and the lake. Great work, great colleagues, but the mission underlying the organization didn't, I would say, make my heart sing. And I was searching for what that could look like. And that was the move to CAMH. So at the time that was complex for personal reasons. I was supposed to be doing a different move. And so throughout your life, you make compromises with spouses, with families, with other obligations, competing interests. Perhaps your great passion in your off hours is rock climbing. You have to find a way to be authentic to yourself. But at a certain point, you're always making adjustments to your career path based on the rest of yourself. But for me, that was a moment where I put my career aspirations first and did that move to in-house and gave up my mahogany desk and my nice view and went and ran consent and capacity board hearings in the basement of the what was then the schizophrenia tower. So that was a really fascinating transition. That's what the particular building was called, of that unit. And it was, I felt really motivating, interesting, ethically complex, politically challenging work that was forever also intellectually satisfying. So my journey has continued on since there, but that was a key fork in the road for me. Next slide, please. So the my hats right now, sort of what does my day-to-day work look like? So I have legal services, I have risk, and that's sort of at a board level and across the organization integrated. I have the privacy function and FOI. And so I'm just flagging here. Some of these things are quasi-legal. So straight legal services is, litigation, incident management, etc. Other things are quasi-legal, right? It really helps that I'm a lawyer, but I don't necessarily have to be a lawyer to wear that hat. So I have found personally that work really enriching and interesting over time, and really complements sort of my skill set and keeps things fresh. The board work is one I didn't expect to do, right? I didn't expect that I would end up spending a lot of time on corporate governance, and I've actually found it endlessly interesting, as well as the compliance work. So that's, like Kate said, a lot of work is legislative compliance. It can also be conflicts of interest. It's compliance with policy. Again, do I have to be a lawyer to do that? Not necessarily, but I bring a particular lens. So being open to the things that will be added to your plate over time is really exciting, and it keeps your work engaging. Next slide, please. One thing before I jump, and this is, I pulled this out because it borrowed from Kate. So again, wonderful to follow on Kate's discussion today. This is just a talk a little bit about the complexity of the health sector. So this is what we have considered to be high risk statutes. And that's based on a certain definition. This is based on amazing work that law students do. So when law students come to my team, they do a lot of analysis of legislative and regulatory compliance, but we do it on a risk-based way, because the task of what is now, by last count, actually 224 pieces of legislation that affect hospitals, is an endless task. So you sort of have to parse it out based on how important is this, because quite frankly, the health sector, like most, has no capacity or interest to be doing things as a paper exercise. So this just gives you a sense of the wide range of really interesting law that you'll be looking at, that you're training on, that applies to what is in many ways a cradle to grave service, right? The university is like a little city. You hire people, you move people on, like you train them, you do all kinds of things. A hospital is like that too. We're an employer. We are your care provider. We are your the person that pays you. We're the person that takes money from you. Like there's all kinds of activities. We protect your personal health information. All kinds of activities that are highly, highly regulated, which means from a lawyer's perspective, it's fascinating work. Next slide. So this one is just another way of looking at it. And we had 203, but that's just because we haven't updated the slide. So there's 224, and we kind of break it down in different ways to understand and consider, okay, in a big organization, where does this fit? And that's that translation service that frequently lawyers in-house provide. You translate from experts or law, legislation, external counsel into speaking a different kind of language. So it's looking at the complexity of things. A big part of my job is finding a way to communicate it really, really simply. So I know I have about 2 minutes left, and if we can just go to the next slide and offer a couple of reflections. So like Kate, I want to really hit home to you that that you're not alone in this journey that you're on. I too reach out to my colleagues all the time for all different kinds of things. I reach out to my peers saying, I have this contract to review. I bet you're looking at it too. Should we coordinate so that we can provide consistent advice to our clients? I take this one, you take the next one. I reach out to colleagues to find energy, excitement, creativity about what the future holds, right? Healthcare's had a really tough time the last couple of years, like every sector, but it's had some specific unique challenges. So to, doing things like going out to give these talks, etc., finding ways to energize yourself. I will say that when I reflect on, when I started in law school, where you are, I did observe over time that there weren't always lawyers coming out loving their work, right? They weren't always saying, I love my job, right? They might have gone to law school because they felt it was a good idea financially. They might have gone to law school for a variety of personal or other reasons. And they didn't all exit saying, you know, I can't wait to get to work every day. And to be clear, nobody goes, I can't wait to get to work every day, but you want to be doing that most days. Otherwise, your career's too long and your life's too short to not love what you do. So I would say it's important to surround yourself with people, with colleagues, with mentors, with people who come behind you, who you will quickly become a mentor to, who are energized, who want to contribute, who want to grow a thriving practice, and to bring that kind of positivity, like not false positivity, but real energy and creativity to their days that brings them personal and professional fulfillment, which frankly is what we're here to do. So I think I have hit my end of time, and Pascal, I will pause and put it back in your capable hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyranne, it was great. We're going to go with Maneet and Nishani for comments and questions. I'm just going to unmute them both. I think we should be fine.
Perfect. I can get started. Thank you, Pascal. So this has been really great. I will say that, so my background is I am a nurse. So health law was something that I was really interested in, but coming into 1L, I was very confused. You know, what does health law mean? What does that entail? What does that look like in practice? So it's been really great to hear from both you, Kate and Nyranne. Thank you so much. Just from my personal experience, I did recently participate in the Toronto 2L recruit, and I was pleasantly surprised at how many firms do offer some type of health law. And I was mostly, in my personal experience, looking at it from a litigation perspective. So there are firms that, you know, represent hospitals or doctors, which I found very interesting. We do have two other speakers with me. Nishani is the other co-president of Health Law Students Association, and Quinn, who is our vice president. So Pascal, if you could also unmute Quinn, please.
Yep.
I can go next. So thank you so much for that. Definitely learned a lot. I'm a third year student, and I'm also very much interested in health law. Prior to law school, I actually completed a background in public health, and I did my Master of Science in Health Services Research. So I, like Kate, came in kind of like stepping, like I know health law is exactly what I want to do. Even through the articling recruits, I was stubborn. I was kind of being a little picky on my opportunities. I didn't apply to all law firms, only ones that had healthcare background. I'm actually happy to say I'll be working with Sunnybrook this summer. So I'm very excited to start that. And I really enjoyed hearing both of your experiences to know like what that hospital work would look like. I'm also a rights advisor right now. So I work with the CCB, and like having that experience as well, like health law is very interesting for me. What helped me personally was taking courses that I was genuinely interested in, like employment law, labor law, even like courses like real estate, just to see how that intersects with health law and seeing like how you can make connections. And I think that's also very important. I was able to work out Children's Aid Society. And I know, Kate, you mentioned that organizations like Children's Society or school boards, they have some healthcare work in there. And that also provided me with a lot of transferable skills. So I really appreciated what both of you had to share today. And I feel like I'm on the right path. So that's great. Like, thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Quinn. I'm a 2L student at the University of Ottawa, and like both Maneet and Nishani, I did my undergrad in biomedical science, originally wanting to be a medical practitioner, a nurse, or something within the healthcare industry. And I found myself liking more of the bioethics and the regulatory side of the healthcare system than I did the actual application, which is why I decided to go to law school. And I was fortunate enough to be able to be a summer student at CAMH this past summer. I feel like there's a lot of CAMH alum now in this call. And I will say that my experience is absolutely incredible. If anyone wants to do it, I think applications are past this summer, but for next year, it was truly an amazing experience. It taught me that I could spend my whole life learning about mental health law and nothing else, and always be learning something new every day. So I genuinely loved the experience, and it made me further my interest in health law even more since then. And I will say, if anyone has not taken the health law course at U Ottawa, it's like a second and third year, it's an upper year course. It is absolutely fantastic. Professor Grubman does an amazing job of giving you a very high level overview of like many different health areas in the health law, health perspective. And it's kind of just, it can pique your interest in whatever like aspect of the health law that you think you're interested in. So I would definitely recommend that. And internships are a great way to explore your interest for a summer and kind of really understand where you kind of want to go with your next steps of your career and your learning experiences. So I would also recommend those.
Thank you. I'm going to unmute Nyranne and Kate here, and we're going to go to the Q&A. Maybe I'll give Maneet, Nishani, and Quinn the first opportunity to ask question. I also received a couple, but if one of you has a question, I saw that you mute yourself, so maybe I'll just unmute you. First, if you have a question, then we can go to question from people in the audience that I received a bit.
I can start off with a question. I know for most students interested in health law, a lot of students don't have healthcare backgrounds, and I know IP law also intersects with health law too sometimes. When you're doing this work and you come across terms or you're working with health professionals and don't understand the language, what are some tips? What do you do in the workplace to kind of make sure you're giving the right advice and minimizing the risk when there's such like complex terms or complex ideas involved?
I can start.
Yeah.
This happened to me so many times. So my mother was a nurse, so I had heard some, general health language in my life, but I never studied to be a healthcare provider. I did, while I was going to law school, do that health services administration piece, which did give me some language, but there have been hilarious stories of me writing when I used to write, but like writing things down, typing things in, and then finding out that what I wrote down phonetically is actually like a healthcare term that I knew nothing about. So there's like, it still happens to me in the healthcare system. This is not a barrier for you getting involved in healthcare. The key piece is connecting yourself to people who do understand and being willing to ask the dumb question. Guess who doesn't ask the dumb question? The first year lawyer, because you're terrified that everything you say is dumb. And so when you become seasoned, you're willing to ask, I have no idea what that means. And it doesn't hurt your soul to admit your vulnerability. So that will come over time, that if it isn't inherent in the background and the training that you did, just ask. But sometimes when you're first out, ask your friend first. It's a good way to get it without being embarrassed.
I think that's fantastic advice, Kate. And what I would add there is, over time, I think I'm increasingly humbled by all the things that I don't know, and I get a kick out of it now, right? I enjoy the fact that it has become clear to me that I have a voice at a table, and everyone else has a voice and a perspective and expertise that they bring to that table. And I am not an ophthalmologist, and I'm not a cardiac surgeon, and therefore, and I'm not the accountant. So it's great to sit there at a table with everyone else bringing their perspective, and it means you are endlessly learning. But like Kate says, when you're starting, ask your friend quietly first. And then if you both can't solve it, then you go to your supervisor or whoever it is. But the short version is, I am not a physician, I am not a nurse, and that's okay. What I bring to the table is still useful to them, as long as I understand that what they bring to the table is useful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Quinn for her question.
So I know that in health law, you're dealing with a lot of complicated situations sometimes, and sometimes you're not always dealing with the most happy or positive situations, and it can be very mentally draining and mentally tiring to deal with this work all the time. How do you unplug from your work, or are you able to, or how do you kind of de-stress after a very hard day of work?
Oh, Quinn. Okay, so here's the thing. Up until the pandemic, I feel like I did great. And I did not take my work home in the same way. because there was space. So for me, I don't know if any of you have done Brené Brown, but Brené Brown's like, choose the 2 values that are most important to you in your life and focus your life on those. So mine are growth and love. Okay, this is perfect area for growth and love because I feel really connected to my values. And then the pandemic hit. And at the beginning, super interesting, but there was a barrage and a weight of work and impact that I didn't realize was impacting me until it was too late. And frankly, there was no time to like take a breather and unplug. So I got burnt out. So like, by the way, this work can burn you out. And it is emotionally dense, and it isn't. So there are lots of ways in which you can look at, this is my client's issue, it's not my issue. There are lots of mental health supports that are available to lawyers. Friendship is helpful. Having a robust network of people around you is helpful. Sleeping is good. And it's not always possible not to be impacted by the work. Nyranne, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Kate. You know, I think there are times in your career when it's easier than others. So I found the first few years of practice, and if I, you know, think back in the recesses of my brain to articling, like I actually found those years hard. I found them hard. It's very intense. Your learning curve is like this. So I really try now as a mentor to students and young lawyers to make that experience a little gentler, a little kinder, because I don't think it had to perhaps be quite that hard. But there is the nature of that volume of learning is a challenge. The pandemic, the first period of the pandemic, I will not lie, I have 2 young kids. School was shut down. I'm a 2-career household. That was not an easy time to go through. Now I'm in a place where I can sort of step back a bit better and frankly do things like this. It's really energizing, quite selfishly, for seasoned lawyers to engage with those who are coming along the path and hear about your career paths. Like Quinn, it sounds like you've had fantastic experience, and I'm really excited to see where you will end up as along with the others. So finding those things professionally, and then having things outside of your job that nurture you, whatever that is for you. For me, I have a young family, so that takes up, I would say, a large portion of my pie. And so for me, what's left goes to exercise, because that helps things like sleep, as Kate said. But you know what? Now is not the phase when I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of other different kinds of things. There's going to be a chapter for that too. So being able to step back a bit and look at your career and your life and marry them up and see, okay, what does the future hold? A lot of different things over time. And if you're going through a rough patch, finding a way to step out of it is really important and get some objectivity. And hopefully there are people in your life that you trust that can support you through those times.
Thank you. Reminder for question, you can ask in the chat. If you also feel like asking it directly, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you for the question. We have a question from the chat. There's a lot of, the question is like, there's a lot of like things that were brought up that like felt like a bit like firefighter role. If we're more interested in helping to plan the future of healthcare delivery as opposed to those firefighting role, what types of things or roles should we consider? Maybe we'll go to Nyranne first for that one.
Sure, that's a great question, because not everybody wants or is suited to that kind of crisis management work. So I think there's a lot of great policy positions where you are mapping the future, and that can be at the government level, in the think tank space, in the regulatory college space. There's a lot of great work out there for policy type positions, some of which are occupied by lawyers, some of which aren't. So that's the quasi-legal space. And there's also different work environments that lend themselves better to that kind of forward-thinking, planning, more structured kind of workplace. I would probably steer away from in-house and steer more towards that government policy space. Kate?
Yeah, and I'd also say the corporate commercial space is good for that too. I mean, there's lots of firefighting in corporate work, but there can be more things like our clients have the same kind of issue repeatedly. How do we create a template that's going to work for them collectively into the future? There is a lot of that work that happens in firms, in some in-house positions sometimes. I agree with Nyranne. In-house positions are really creative, but there's a lot of firefighting that happens, and it's a dynamic environment that is all, again, growth and love. Like, you're changing all the time, opportunity to change. But if you want to have a longer path, the other place is regulatory colleges. They're the ones setting the standards. They're the ones looking into, or associations. So the Ontario Hospital Association, the Ontario Medical Association, or any of the associations across the country. That's another space. Yeah, and someone else is talking about digital health startups. So lots of corporate entities that are trying to figure out their context. You're getting strategic advice. I do have lots of friends who are doing startup work. It's not traditional health law. Again, it's that wisdom. What matters? What do you need to think about? But you can also create strategy in those spaces. Yeah, Pascal is like, maybe that's a whole lot of firefighting in a startup.
Well, on one hand, definitely, like, for example, like there's a lot of like, AI companies looking into like, healthcare, making like, a lot of like great change, and like we work with some of them in the fertility space, but like there's fires every time, right? Like nonstop. And like, as a lawyer, people look at you to like solve those. So you need to be able to do a little bit of firefighting and startup, unfortunately. We did receive another question. I'll go with Kate first for that one. What kind of like 1L experience looks good on a resume for 2L summer health law opportunities? I know you talked about that a little bit earlier about your path, but let's say you had to like start from scratch, your 1L, Kate Dewhirst, like, what will look good?
Okay, it depends what background you have. So if you have a clinical background, looks super awesome. If you have done any kind of work like Nyranne was talking about, that she worked in a hospital, that looks super awesome. What if you don't? What if you don't have any of that? You're going to write a wingdinger of a cover letter that talks about, my only goal in life is to serve this kind of client population. Please read, when you are applying to a law firm, what that law firm does. Because if it's your greatest passion to serve long-term care homes and they don't, you're out. So leverage the experience you have. If you're a 1L, you haven't taken any focused courses. Leverage if you have other background that you can rely on, but then tell the story. I told the story, my grandmother got sick, she was very healthy, and she died. And the healthcare system actually was not there for her. That was a real motivator for me getting involved in health law. I didn't have the experience, the technical experience. I had a really good story and a passion. So I would say those are some strategies. And volunteer, as Nyranne is saying, for sure.
If you want to get into a position, offer your services to the right place to get you a step closer. Kate's discussion about publishing or working for professors. I'll be honest, I look at a lot of CVs of folks at a lot of different levels, lawyer, non-lawyer, seasoned leaders, people doing their summer, their first summer job. And it's how you tell that story in a compelling way and how you demonstrate that you understand who you're applying to. You can read things, and I can tell when you just copied and pasted. And I can tell when you did your research and you show up prepared. That has an incredible impact.
Can you tell if they use ChatGPT though? This is going to be the next question for the next one you start receiving. So we have a question from Emily in the chat. In the aftermath of COVID-19, have you, both Kate and Nyranne, noticed any short-term or long-term impact in health law and like maybe like health law position for people early career? Maybe Kate first.
How much time do you have? everything's changed. The totality of the delivery of the healthcare system has changed. Like, it is the biggest, fastest change I have experienced in 25 years. So lots of impact from that. Huge innovation, huge, like such willingness to continue to innovate. 2, delivery virtually of healthcare, huge change. How people deliver the service, how they receive the service, the willingness of organizations to tap in and listen to the people they serve, the clients, the patients, the caregivers that they serve, huge willingness to do that. Another big change, huge burnout. I have never in my 25 years seen so much burnout at the level of administration, clinicians, frontline staff. Like 10 times, like the 10 times the number of retirements. I do physician privileges cases. I'm seeing doctors saying, I know I made a mistake. I cannot complete my record keeping because I'm burned out. Like, such vulnerability in a way I've never seen before. But also another piece is just willingness, like the ready, fire, aim approach was not present in healthcare. Very traditional prior to the pandemic. But in the pandemic, people started creating COVID clinics within 24 hours. Never would have happened before that. So that willingness to partner, creating actual relationships in community, amazing. But also now, like, a little bit of distaste of, why is this taking so long? Why are there so many legal barriers for us keeping that, that pace of relationship? And now the lawyers are like, yeah, you did that wrong though. You did it very badly and wrong. So like, we're just trying to like bring some stuff back, but not creating barriers to the right approach, which is we need to be more connected as a system.
So maybe just to complement that, if I put myself in your shoes of what does this all mean for your work as you head in and towards the workforce, like, it's always been the case that, personal and professional resilience and adaptability was really the name of the game. Like, it is table stakes. It is expected that you are smart, hardworking, organized, professional, prepared, thoughtful. But now all of the soft skills, which before made you a nicer person to spend time with, and now are essential features to your ability to have a long-term, successful, thriving career, are your ability to adapt and your ability to bounce back. So all the things that make you, hardy, professionally and personally, are really things to spend some time on and will help you as you engage in the workforce.
Thank you. We have a question specifically for Nyranne here. The person is thanking you both for the information presented, found that super helpful. Mentioned that there are one L student who's particularly passionate about mental health law and justice in that space. And they're asking Nyranne, what future opportunities can I keep in mind to apply and work with your team, for example? They mentioned that their personal research interests involve the BC Mental Health Act and arguably the lack of constitutionality surrounding involuntary patient care in psychiatric facilities. Are there any other Ottawa centered opportunities based on these interests? Anything you would recommend?
Yeah, so somebody interested in pursuing a mental health law career, if there's opportunities across the country. If I'm assuming your interest is Ottawa based, certainly my facility has that. We provide the largest volume of mental health services in the region. The Royal Ottawa Healthcare Group is the service of specialty. It's sort of a CAMH of our region. And they do have legal services that are provided. Other areas, you can look for those who might be interested in the policy space, there was the mental health commission type work that has kind of evolved over time. So I think it depends on the specific kinds of interests. Certainly, my team, we recruit for summer student placements. I take on January SPI students and work very closely with the Center for Health Law Policy and Ethics, as Pascal knows well. He was a key collaborator on this of developing, students who have a real interest in health law generally, some of whom have an interest in mental health law specifically. So we post for those opportunities and connect with the center. And I think the center is the place for students to start. I don't know who the best person is to connect with at this time, but expressing your specific interest in where you want to go and getting some guidance for your career is, I think, a great way to start.
Thank you. I'm inquiring in a chat. I don't want to call out the person that I think it is, but I will put it in a chat who the best person is to reach out on that. Oh, Colleen, go ahead. I will.
Oh, I was just going to say that it is Sophie Nunnally, who's our new associate director, and she's not on the screen there just at the moment, but hopefully she'll come on soon so you can eyeball her and track her down. There she is. So you can reach out to Sophie to find out about the different placements that we have with Nyranne, but also with Bruyere, and we're working on others as well. So.
Sophie, I know I'm putting you on a spot, but like anything you want to say on that, and like share some of like the position that like either that were filled or that might coming up like shortly.
So at the moment we have, or at least in past years, we've had students working at the Ottawa Hospital, as was just mentioned, and also at Bruyere Institute. Nyranne, I know I've spoken a little bit with the folks in your office about maybe expanding it to the fall term. So there might be an opportunity for more people depending on need. So those are conversations that certainly we can have, and do reach out if you're interested. We've also been exploring the possibility of students doing directed research projects, so a paper on some kind of legal question that's going to be useful to a healthcare institution, and doing that for credit. So that's something also that's something we can discuss if anyone's interested. So do reach out if that's of interest.
Thank you. Maybe I'll go with Kate and Nyranne. I'd be great to hear your thoughts about that as well after. What are some of like the skills you like to see in young lawyers that you work with? Like, and I guess on Nyranne from Colleen, I think you have a question too. We'll go to that first.
Oh, no, please you go. I just wanted to get in the queue, Pascal.
All right, perfect. That you see and appreciate as a young lawyer, it'd be like, well, this is someone like going to succeed. It's someone I want to invest in. It's someone, for example, Nyranne, like I want to keep for articling, right? You get a lot of like student, you can keep all of them. Like what makes you like, pick one? So let's go with Kurt first.
So through a lot of trial and error, I've come up with the 3 things that I cannot teach. So I can teach, coach, mentor, support a lot of things, especially content, frankly. But what I cannot teach is, do you have the right brains? My team, I'm very fortunate. They're a really talented, bright group, and they just bring that to the table. The second thing is having the right mindset, which means understanding what your role is. And especially in an in-house environment, that takes a lot of EQ. It takes a lot of, we call them soft skills. I don't think they're soft skills personally. I think they are the workplace skills that one needs, but understanding what's their contribution and seeing the value in their role. That I can't quite teach. It's a bit of an intangible that somebody brings to the table. The third thing is the values. Kate talked earlier about the 2 values in her life are growth and love. Those are the things that she aligns to when making choices. Kate, I don't want to speak for you, but I was listening carefully, of course. If you don't have the values connect with an institution like a healthcare institution, like the hospital I work for now, or a ChemH that I worked for before, if you don't see the importance of that contribution to society, then why would you do that work? You're going to work hard. You're going to have challenging issues. You're going to, it's going to take a toll. So you gotta love it, and you gotta have that values connect. So the brains, the mindset, and the values have to work. And that's what you bring to the table. And frankly, the rest we can train and support. So Kate, I don't know what your experience is.
I think Nyranne has summed it up in a much more sophisticated way than I would have said it. Because I do think that values piece is essential. And values change. Like, so every organization, every workplace that you're considering or workplace that you're going to create has a different set of values. So what I value isn't going to be the same as what you value or an organization might be. For me, the values that I see, and we've, over these years, I've had lots of great experiences with students and lawyers and lots of poor experiences with students and lawyers. And I would say for me, some of the things that work with my style, curiosity, like a willingness to be curious, because lawyers, we have this terrible tendency to be certain. And we have to convey advice. We have to give, at the end of the day, we have to come and we have to give our best. This is our best place for it. Where I have friction with people that work with me is when they're certain off the jump and there's no curiosity to learn from the other side. Nyranne talked about like the willingness to collaborate. I guess that would be my second one, is like to see the value in other people's contribution. That is, for me, a huge component, a willingness to collaborate, to see the value of another perspective. And flexibility is another one that I don't have a practice that is the same. It's not going to be the same day in, day out. It is always changing. If someone needs to have total stability, that's just not going to work. And I do think it's really relevant for you to consider what you would like now. And it doesn't have to be the same as what you want in the future. But like just checking in with yourself is like, how do I want to add value? What are the ways in which I add value? Like I am not, I think of so many organizations and law firms that are just radically different and effective. I am never going to be Marie Henin. I would love to be Marie Henin. I find her fierce and fabulous and effective. That is never going to be who I am. And that's okay, but I also have to convey that to my clients. You're not getting that kind of lawyer when you engage with me. So that knowledge of yourself, I do think that's helpful. Knowing yourself, what your strengths are, not trying. By the way, at the beginning, you're going to pretend you're something else. It's fine. Get that experience. But eventually you want to know who you are and what you value, because that's what's going to give you longevity.
Thank you so much. Holly?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to your story, Kate, a little bit, and where you decided that you had that entrepreneurial kind of streak, and I think that's a really it's such a great story, and the way that you've developed and started different law firms over the time of your career so far. So making your career work for your life and not your life work for your career. So I just wondered about the sort of just the pragmatic stuff about starting your own law firm. How did you learn to do that? How did you figure it out? Is this something we could better help our students with, whatever their trajectory? Because I sort of do feel that, one of the lovely things to make one feel better about your life and your career is that you've got choices. And so knowing how to take a choice, that there's this option. So I wondered if you just could pragmatically give us some of the skinny on how you pulled that off.
Some of it was just ignorance. I had no idea what I was doing. So part of it is that. Yes, absolutely. Universities and frankly, the Law Society can do a lot better in supporting solo and small practice, for sure. There is no incubator. So there are these little, what used to be little workbooks that you would get from the Law Society on how to start a business. So that practically you can get that. Now, by the way, the book that you also want to get, How to Close a Practice, because that had other content in it, how to start a practice. So it happened that I got both. And then I was like, why didn't you say that when I was opening my practice? So there's all kinds of things that you stumble into. I think something that I have always valued in myself, and I think it's because in part, I was I was single personally for a really long time. I had to bet on myself for a really long time. So I moved out of my house when I was young, and I had to kind of bet on myself. And I didn't know otherwise. I didn't have somebody that was kind of buoying me up. And I think that came as an advantage of like, I could take risks. This is not going to be the same if you have a family, you're a single parent, you're trying to like pay the bills. And I had a dog. She was willing to go, with me on my journey. I could take some risk that I don't think that's available to everyone who doesn't have a built-in fund holder, who doesn't have a built-in family or, family law firm that they can model their life. I didn't have any of those things, but I did have low expectations for for financial things. That's how I could do it. I wanted to follow a passion, and I saw some other small firms. I do think it's really helpful to see other small enterprises and think, they do it. I'm smart too. I'm sure I can figure that out. So some of it's just, you don't know until you're in it. And then you're like, this is harder than I thought it might be. But also, by the way, it's way easier than anybody tells you it's going to be. It looks like putting up your own shingle, like you're the bravest person in the universe, and no one would do that. You have to go to a big firm. No, you don't. No, you don't. There are all kinds of people who, bootstrap it and figure it out. But I do think an incubator or support for solo and small practices, and there's so many more, because why? The pandemic. Look around you. Tons of lawyers have their own businesses now. Tons of us. So look around, and there are some more resources. There's also something called the Solo and Small Lawyers Conference every year in Ontario. And originally I would get lots of advice there.
Can I just add to that? There are a number of skills that one requires to have a long and varied career, none of which are taught in law school or in the bar admissions course. So one, you're taught to be a great lawyer and to be right and to think that you're right, as Kate had said earlier. They don't teach how to run a small business and whether you are naturally inclined to being a small business owner, right? Much like physicians don't always, when they want to open a family practice, think that they want to be a small business owner, and yet they become one. They don't necessarily, you don't come to the table knowing how to be a people leader, how to be a manager, how to look at finances. So those are a number of complementary skills to having a long and thriving career that it's really worth investing in. And curious to see where, law schools and the bar admissions and other continuing education opportunities for lawyers that help them build the right complementary skill sets to succeed.
Thank you, Nyranne. We're pretty much at time. So I think we're going to wrap up 1 minute or two early. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, Nyranne. Thank you, Queen Maneet and Nishani, for your presentation, your comments, sharing your path. And if the students want to reach out, I'm sure I know all of you are like always willing to answer questions and give some advice. So thank you for Colleen, Giles, and Sophie for organizing. And as I was mentioning in the chat, I highly suggest contacting Sophie for any opportunity to be able to advise you, orient you, and all of that. So thank you everyone for attending, and see you soon.
And thank you, Pascal. Thank you so much for moderating. And we didn't get to talk about your amazing career as well. So you're fighting a lot of fires in startup companies, Pascal. So I know that Pascal is a great friend to the Centre still, despite not working with us anymore. And that if you're interested in that side of life, that he would be a great resource as well. So thank you to everybody, and we'll see you soon
Thank you.
at our next firefighting event.